Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unraveling a genuinely fascinating and honestly kind of unexpected medical mystery. Look, if you've been paying any attention at all to the health space recently, you have absolutely heard of GLP-1 medications. I mean, they've burst onto the scene practically overnight, right? They're being hailed as this modern medical miracle that is fundamentally reshaping the whole landscape of metabolic health. But, as with any massive medical breakthrough, the deeper we look into the real-world application of these treatments, the more complex the story becomes. So today, we're zeroing in on a highly specific emerging side effect that researchers are really just beginning to fully understand.
To set our baseline here, we've got to acknowledge just how monumental these drugs actually are. GLP-1s are truly the undisputed champions of modern diabetes care. For decades, managing type 2 diabetes was this incredibly steep uphill battle. It relied on a super delicate, often exhausting balance of insulin, strict diets, and other medications that, frankly, only tackled parts of the problem. And then these medications arrived and completely flipped the script. They offer highly effective blood sugar control alongside remarkable weight management. It's exactly the kind of dual-action therapy doctors have been dreaming of for their patients. The popularity of these treatments is off the charts right now, and for very good reason. They work remarkably well for their intended purpose.
But I want you to imagine something for a second. Think about your absolute favorite meal. Maybe it's a rich, slow-cooked pasta dish, a perfectly spiced curry, or, hey, even just a warm chocolate chip cookie fresh out of the oven. Imagine sitting down to eat it, taking that first, highly anticipated bite, and nothing. What if that meal suddenly tasted like cardboard? What if the amazing aroma of your morning coffee completely vanished? This isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. For a growing number of patients who are finding incredible physiological success on these wonder drugs, this sudden, totally joyless sensory experience is literally becoming their daily reality.
Section 1. The GLP-1 phenomenon.
So, as you likely know, GLP-1 is a naturally occurring hormone. It signals the pancreas to produce insulin and basically tells your brain that you're full. The medications we're discussing today are simply synthetic, long-lasting versions of that exact hormone. They mimic this natural process, effectively keeping blood sugar stable and significantly dialing down your appetite. It really is a brilliant, elegant solution for metabolic disorders.
Section 2. A strange sensory mystery.
Now, there is a really stark contrast between the expected reality and the unexpected twists we're actually seeing in clinics. A patient starts GLP-1 therapy, fully expecting their blood sugar to stabilize and the weight to drop, just like the trials promised. And that right there is the triumph of modern medicine. But alongside those positive metabolic changes, an unexplained impairment of taste and smell begins to creep in. Patients aren't just feeling less hungry, they're finding that the basic sensory mechanics of eating and smelling are physically altering. It's a side effect that definitely wasn't splashed across the initial headline studies, but it is one that's increasingly dominating the conversation in doctors' offices. To really grasp this, we have to ground this clinical anomaly in the everyday human experience. The impacts are super specific, and they're deeply disruptive. Patients report severely diminished flavor profiles. Sweet things might suddenly taste metallic, or savory things might just taste utterly bland. Then there's the altered perception of familiar scents. Just imagine walking into your kitchen, and instead of smelling dinner cooking, you smell something vaguely chemical, or maybe nothing at all. Ultimately, this all culminates in a general loss of culinary enjoyment. Eating transforms from a fundamental human pleasure into a purely mechanical chore.
Section 3. Unpacking the clinical data. You know, anecdotes from patients are incredibly important, but to truly understand the scope of this issue, we have to look directly at the clinical research. And when we directly compare smell and taste impairment rates, the divide is striking. The baseline rate of these sensory issues in patients undergoing standard, traditional diabetes care is vastly overshadowed by the rates for patients specifically on GLP-1 therapy. This proves we aren't just dealing with a random fluke or a few isolated complaints or even just a symptom of diabetes itself. We are looking at a measurable, distinct trend directly linked to the introduction of this specific class of medication.
And this isn't just a minor fractional bump in the data either. We're talking about a massive 100% statistical increase in sensory impairment for those taking the drug compared to standard care. In the world of clinical research, a jump this large is basically a blaring siren. It mathematically confirms that this is a real, robust pattern, absolutely not a coincidence. This doubling of risk is the smoking gun that has literally forced the medical community to set up, take notice, and begin aggressively investigating the biological mechanisms at play here.
Which brings us to a definitive conclusion from the latest research. GLP-1s linked to smell and taste impairment in diabetes patients. This simple statement represents a major shift in how we understand these drugs. It's the scientific community officially recognizing the link. It validates the experiences of thousands of patients who honestly thought they might just be imagining things. The connection is real, it's documented, and it's a known variable in the rapidly expanding world of GLP-1 treatments.
Section 4. The biological connection.
Okay, we have the evidence, and we know the phenomenon is real. But to truly solve this mystery, we've got to understand the why behind the biology. How does a medication designed to target the gut and the pancreas end up messing with your nose and your tongue? Let's walk through the biological breadcrumb trail. Step 1. The GLP-1 medication is administered and enters the bloodstream. Step 2 is where things get really fascinating. We used to think these drugs primarily operated below the neck, but the medication actually crosses over and interacts heavily with central nervous system receptors in the brain, the exact same areas that process fullness and reward. Step 3 is the unintended consequence. Because those reward and satiety centers in the brain are so intricately wired to our olfactory, meaning smell, and gustatory, meaning taste, systems, stimulating one accidentally scrambles the signals of the other. The drug isn't actually damaging the taste buds on your tongue, it is literally rewiring how your brain interprets flavor and scent.
Section 5. Why this changes everything.
Understanding the brain chemistry is great, right? But we have to bring this back to the practical reality for the millions of people relying on these treatments daily. Why does losing a bit of taste matter so much in the grand scheme of diabetes care? Well, it creates a profound domino effect. Starting with nutrition, if healthy, complex foods suddenly taste terrible, patients might actually regress. They might gravitate toward highly processed, hyperpalatable foods just to feel something when they eat, which completely defeats the whole purpose of the drug. Next is mental health. I mean, so much of human connection, culture, and pure joy revolves around sharing meals. Strip that away, and you are looking at increased isolation and a significant drop in overall quality of life. Finally, and perhaps most critically for doctors, is treatment adherence. If the medication makes life miserable, patients will simply abandon the drug. A miracle cure doesn't work if the patient flat out refuses to take it.
Which leaves us with this incredibly difficult, provocative question. When a miracle drug takes away the flavor of life, is the cure worth the cost? GLP-1s are undeniably saving lives and completely revolutionizing metabolic health. But this sensory mystery reminds us that in medicine, there's rarely a magic bullet without a trade-off. As researchers continue to tweak these formulations and study their long-term effects, balancing physiological survival with the actual joy of living is absolutely going to be the next great frontier in diabetes care. Keep an eye on this space because the science is evolving every single day. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.